Kaldi wiped the sweat off his brow as he trudged across the highlands. The bleating of goats echoed around him. Using the view of Rasta Shen to orient himself, he saw the goats running about in a field. He took a swig from the water skin slung over his shoulder, and then he walked toward the field. His shirt stuck to his skin by the time he had reached the field. He whistled. The nearest goats darted away from him, with an energy he'd never before seen. "Come back," he yelled. The goat leapt over a rock as he lumbered after him. Kaldi leaned on his staff, panting, a crunching sound behind him prompting him to turn. Two goats munched on a bush, and then darted off, leaping over each other. "What in God's name?" Kaldi muttered to himself. He examined the intact parts of the bush. Its broad leaves were a glossy dark green, and its branches were adorned with clusters of white flowers along with red berries. He stroked his chin as he watched his goats leaping and prancing about the field. Was it the berries? Kaldi took a deep breath. He pulled a berry off the branch and put it into his mouth. The bitter flavor made him grimace, and he bit something hard within the fruit. He spat out 2 lightly colored beans and tossed them aside. As he swallowed the remains of the fruit, he felt his sluggishness subside. He chased after the goats with a renewed vigor, rounding them up. "These berries must be magic!" He snatched more of them from the bush. As night fell, Kaldi sat behind a campfire. The goats continued to prance, but remained by the firelight. His palms shook and his face twitched. He felt awake. "What troubles you, my son?" A figure approached the campsite. As he drew closer, Kaldi recognized the man as Tamrat, a monk from the nearby monastery. Tamrat looked at both Kaldi and the goats. "I've just discovered something amazing." Kaldi leapt up and held Tamrat's shoulders. "There are magic berries growing in these lands." "Slow down, my son." The monk leaned away from the goat herd. "It sounds like you've seen something which frightens you." "It's God's truth," Kaldi grinned. "I was looking for my goats and I found them munching red berries from a bush I'd never seen before, and they started dancing." "Dancing?" Tamrat blinked, trembling at the volume of the man's rapid manner of speech. "They were just leaping around with an energy I've never seen before," Kaldi continued. "When I saw it unfold, I tried the berries myself, and now I can't sleep because my head is filled with thoughts." "Enough!" Tamrat wrenched free of Kaldi's grasp. "Show me these berries." Kaldi reached into his satchel and produced a handful of the berries. He scattered many across the floor as his hand shook. "They're bitter tasting," he said, "but if you're feeling sluggish, they will revive you." "How many did you eat?" Tamrat's eyes widened. "I lost count." Kaldi continued to twitch and grin. "I think you've had too many." Tamrat scooped them up. "These berries must be the work of the devil." He threw the berries into the campfire. "What are you doing?" Kaldi's eyes widened. "You're destroying a miracle." He lunged toward the campfire. "I see no miracle here." Tamrat shoved him back. "Whatever these berries are, they have a sinister effect and must be..." He paused, sniffing the air. Kaldi sniffed too. The smoke from the fire carried a fresh aroma. No creation of the devil could smell so heavenly. Tamrat breathed in the aroma, feeling refreshed. "We should save the berries. There's plenty around. I'm happy to lose the ones you burned just to savor the aroma." Tamrat offered a hand to Kaldi. The goat herd poked around through the fire with his crook. Amongst the flame he saw the beans from the fruit, which had blackened. "Let's burn another one." Kaldi picked up another discarded berry and then tossed it into the fire. He and Tamrat sat down, breathing the aroma of the roasted bean. "You said you couldn't sleep after eating the berries," Tamrat asked. Kaldi shook his head, still giddy. Tamrat stroked his chin. "I have been having trouble staying awake during prayers." "Perhaps eat one of these berries before you start," Kaldi grinned. "Just be sure to eat around the beans. Here, I still have a few left." Tamrat accepted the berries and placed them in his pouch. "God bless you, my son," he nodded to Kaldi, "and may this fruit be prosperous." Or at least that's how the legend goes. Are we really going to accept that coffee came from magical dancing goats in Ethiopia? Or is there another explanation that gets us to where we are today with an estimated 2.25 billion cups of coffee being consumed every day? If you're into coffee as much as some people are, maybe you're happy with the explanation of the dancing goats. But let's take a deeper dive and see what we can learn about the history behind coffee. We begin chasing coffee through history thousands of years ago in the Middle East. Oral traditions traced back centuries show nomadic tribes were using coffee plants that were native to Yemen before recorded history. Sufi monasteries would use the plant to aid in concentration during prayers. The more traditional way of preparing coffee, roasting the seeds for consumption, did not start until the 1400s. During this time, brewed coffee was strictly regulated, being only used by the medical profession and the priesthood. Doctors would give the brew to patients in need of better digestion, and the priesthood would use it to remain alert during long nights of study in the church. Written documentation of the coffee tree, coffee bean, and its consumption began in the 15th century. Sufi Imam Muhammad ibn Sa'id al-Dabani was the first to bring the coffee bean to Yemen from Ethiopia. Using Somali merchants from Berbera, al-Dabani brought coffee beans from the interior of what is now Ethiopia to Yemen and other countries in the Middle East. Sufis in Yemen would use the beverage not only as a device to keep them awake during nighttime devotionals, but also to enter into a sort of spiritual intoxication as they chanted the name of God. Manuscripts at the time trace the spread of coffee northward from Yemen, first to Mecca in 1414 and then Medina, followed by further expansions to Cairo, Damascus, Baghdad, and Constantinople by the early 1500s. Being associated with the Sufi religion, coffee houses began popping up in religious areas of Cairo and eventually Aleppo, Syria. Istanbul's first coffee shop was opened in 1554. The expansion of coffee in the 16th century wasn't all jubilant prayers and trips to the doctors, however. There were many political roadblocks along the way. In 1511, conservative Orthodox imams in a theological court in Mecca forbade coffee due to its stimulating effects. This ban was kept in place until 1524, when it was overturned by order of Ottoman Turkish Sultan Suleiman I. Cairo instituted a similar ban in 1532, which resulted in the warehouses and coffee houses in the city being destroyed. A few years later, German physicist-botanist Leonhard Rauwolf was among the first Europeans to write about coffee when he first tasted it in Aleppo in 1573. In his 1582 book, Dr. Leonhard Rauwolf's Travels into the Eastern Country, he details the drinking of coffee. Quote, "A very good drink they call chaub, that is almost as black as ink and very good in illness, especially of the stomach. This they drink in the morning early in the open places before everyone, without any fear or regard, out of china cups, as hot as they can, sipping a little at a time." It was also around this time that the word coffee entered the English language. It got there from the Dutch koffie, which borrowed that from the Ottoman Turkish kahve, which in turn came from the Arabic kahwe. The word kahwe translates roughly into the dark one, referring to the color of the drink, which ended up being the natural designation for the beverage. Italy was where coffee made its first foray into mainland Europe. The Republic of Venice maintained vibrant trade routes between Italy and northern Africa and the Middle East, resulting in sought-after goods such as coffee being available in Europe. In the late 1500s, Venetian botanist and physician Prospero Alpini imported coffee from Egypt to the Republic of Venice. Soon after, coffee became the realm of intellectuals and social gatherings as coffee shops began to open one by one. After its initial introductions, there were some representatives from the Catholic Church that opposed coffee, believing it to be the devil's drink. Pope Clement VIII came to the rescue this time. Upon tasting coffee for the first time, he declared, "Why, this Satan's drink is so delicious that it would be a pity to let the infidels have exclusive use of it. We shall cheat Satan by baptizing it." This blessing by the Pope only served to increase the commercial success of coffee in Italy. By the year 1723, Venice alone had more than 200 coffee shops. Coffee took hold in England in the early 17th century, with the first coffee house being opened in 1651. Oxford's Queen's Lane Coffee House opened in 1654 and is still in existence today. By 1675, there were more than 3,000 coffee houses in England. However, these coffee houses began to be used for more than just a social cup of coffee with friends. Due to the banning of women from coffee houses in England, as well as many other countries in Europe, men used their time there to engage in deep political and religious discussion. The Crown thought this such a problem that Charles II tried unsuccessfully to stamp out coffee houses in England in the 1670s. During this period, many people thought very highly of the health benefits of coffee. In a 1661 tract entitled A Character of Coffee and Coffee Houses, a member of Parliament wrote that coffee, quote, "'tis extolled for drying up the crudities of the stomach and for expelling fumes out of the head. Excellent berry, which can cleanse the Englishman's stomach of phlegm and expel giddiness out of his head." End quote. Not everyone in England was a fan of this new commodity, however. An anonymous petition in 1674, simply entitled A Women's Petition Against Coffee, declared,
"The excessive use of that newfangled, abominable heathish liquor called coffee has eunuched our husbands and crippled our more kind gallants, that they are become as impotent as age."
Germany was the next place that the coffee and coffeehouse movement popped up, with the first coffee houses opening in the North Sea port cities such as Wuppertal-Ronsdorf in 1673 and Hamburg in 1677. It took until the 18th century for the popularity of coffee to spread throughout the country and to be taken up by the ruling class. As early as 1675, coffee was being served in the court of Frederick Wilhelm of Brandenburg, but the first coffee shop did not open in Berlin until 1721. Coffee had become so beloved in Germany that one of the most famous classical composers, Johann Sebastian Bach, wrote a miniature comic opera about it. In the early 1730s, he composed Schweigt stille, plaudert nicht, or Be Still, Stop Chattering, also known as the Coffee Cantata. The cantata amusingly tells the tale of a daughter pleading with her father to let her drink the coffee that she's in love with. Her father disapproves of her devotion to the then newfangled fashion of drinking coffee. Here's a sample of the Coffee Cantata.
Ei, wie schmeckt der Kaffee süße, lieblicher als 1000 Küsse, milder als Muskatenwein. Kaffee, Kaffee muss ich haben, und wenn mich jemand will laben, ach, so schenkt mir Kaffee ein.
Oh, how sweet coffee does taste. Better than 1,000 kisses. Milder than muscat wine. Coffee, I've got to have it. And if someone wants to perk me up, just give me a cup of coffee.
While the Germans were busy writing satirical operas about how much they loved coffee, it was still on the move, this time westward. In 1720, French officer Gabriel de Clieu transported coffee seedlings to Martinique in the Caribbean. After only 50 years there were almost 20,000 coffee trees on the island. This allowed the spread of coffee to Haiti, Mexico, and other islands in the Caribbean. In 1727, the King of Portugal dispatched Francisco de Mea Palheta to French Guiana to obtain coffee seeds as he wanted to become part of the coffee market. During his initial visit, Palheta had difficulty obtaining any of the seeds or samples of trees. He decided to change his tactics. He wooed the French governor's wife to such an extent that she secretly sent him enough seeds and shoots to start coffee production in Brazil, at that time a territory of Portugal. While the coffee industry had now been born in Brazil, it didn't truly take off until its independence in 1822. This led to clearing huge tracts of land in the rainforest near Rio and Sao Paulo for coffee plantations. By 1852, Brazil had become the largest producer of coffee in the world. By 1900, the coffee from Brazil made its way to Kenya and Tanzania, not far from its birthplace in Ethiopia. This round trip took only 600 years. Up until 1950, Brazil produced more coffee than every other country in the world combined. In the 1950s, due to a widening of the competition in the free market, other countries began growing coffee, including Colombia, the Ivory Coast, Ethiopia, and Vietnam. Over the next several decades, the coffee industry in Vietnam grew until it finally overtook Colombia in 1999 to become the second largest coffee producer in the world. By 2011, Vietnam had captured a 15% market share of coffee production. The last decade has forced changes to the coffee farmers in Latin America. As the popularity of coffee-based drinks such as lattes, frappuccinos, and other sugar-based coffee drinks took over, so too did the type of beans used in their creation. With the addition of so much sugar to the drink, coffee houses realized they could get away with using lower quality coffee beans. Arabica beans have been supplanted by the Robusto bean in most of the Western world for sugary coffee drinks. The public was a fan of this, as not only were they cheaper, but they also had more caffeine. The producers of these beans received much less income from these beans than from the formerly popular Arabica beans, leading to a downturn in the economy of Latin America. So where does that leave us? Coffee left Ethiopia to travel around the world before returning 600 years later. We may be no closer to uncovering if there really were any dancing goats, but the coffee industry continues to evolve. Climate change is affecting the way that farmers grow coffee beans to cope with falling yields. People hoping not only to be health conscious but environmentally aware are changing the way they drink their coffee. Meanwhile, coffee houses are innovating to keep growing by adding coffee blends as well as roasting the beans locally to preserve the flavor. So enjoy your cup any way you'd like it, and if you see a goat, be sure to tell him thanks. We aren't done quite yet. We've brewed up 3 wild facts about coffee. Dislike Zoom meetings? You can blame coffee, as it inspired the creation of the webcam. In the early 90s, researchers at Cambridge University hated going to the kitchen only to discover that the pot of coffee was empty. They invented a camera connected to the network so that they could monitor the status of the coffee pot from their desk. The top coffee-consuming country is as far away from the environment needed to grow coffee as possible. The average adult in Finland consumes over 27 pounds of coffee each year, with Norway and Iceland in the second and third spots. The most expensive cup of coffee in the world clocks in at nearly $100 and is made from cat poop. The cat-like Asian palm civet will regularly consume coffee cherries, but its body is unable to digest them. In the stomach, the coffee is then fermented before being disposed of by the cat. Farmers then wash and sell the beans. Thank you for listening. This has been the History Behind Podcast. I'm your host, Eli Webb. Additional voiceovers by Krista Markley and Jackie Bersenyos. Please be sure to like and follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram, or help support us on buymeacoffee.com/disparate media. Join us next time when we discover the history behind the guitar. Here's a sample of the coffee cantata.